Everybody, today is Thursday, September 22nd. I want to have this video for two reasons. Number one, if you were not in class today, I want to make sure that you understand what we did. And number two, I want this video to serve as a reminder or just kind of as something that people can go back to and look at if you were in class, just to remind you what the steps are for writing a scientific argument. So first thing is this slide. Remember, if you were in class, this is the rubric. So if you were not in class, pause the video, take a minute to read through this rubric before you move on. Okay, just a reminder, in order to follow the steps for RACE, we're going to restate the question, we're going to answer the question, we're going to cite the evidence, and we're going to use reasoning to explain the evidence. Okay? I color-coded this because I'm going to highlight these examples in this way in the following slides. So the first thing we need to do, remember, is we're gathering all the evidence that we had that supports the answer that we came up with. And of course, we know claim 1, flowing water, formed the channel on Mars. If you evaluate your evidence, you know that we are not going to use evidence card A because that was the weakest piece of evidence, and you only want to use your strongest, most compelling evidence for a scientific argument. Here's a beginning example. So if you wrote something like this, the geologic process that could have formed the channel on Mars is flowing water. According to evidence card F, the picture of the rock found on Mars looks just like the conglomerate rock that's found on Earth. You may be tempted to think that that was a good scientific argument because you've answered the question, you've used evidence. But this is really what we're looking at. So the green, remember, is when you restate the question, and the orange, the orange is when you answer it. And then we've got the use of evidence, which is evidence card F, but what you're missing is the use of reasoning to explain why that evidence supports your claim. So let's keep going. And this time we're going to add what we know from key concept number 2. And it would look something like this. The geologic process that could have formed the channel on Mars is flowing water. According to evidence card F, the picture of the rock found on Mars looks just like the conglomerate rock that's found on Earth. Now I'm tying it together. When landforms on different rocky planets look similar, it's evidence that they may have been formed by the same geologic process. This is a good scientific argument, so this would be something that would probably earn a B because it is explaining the evidence. The only thing that's missing is that last sentence that kind of ties everything together. Remember, we need to tie this evidence and the explanation of the evidence back to the original claim that water formed the channel by using the background information. Because remember, we're just really looking at, we're talking about what Mars looked like, but we're using the conglomerate rock on Earth. So we need to make that tie. So here's our final one. If you can say, so we can assume that water formed the channel on Mars, it's basically you're restating your answer here, and then that kind of ties it back to our claim. All right? So in essence, what we're really doing is we're restating, answering, using evidence. We're using reasoning to explain the evidence, and then we're re-answering again or restating our answer. Let's take some weaker arguments and make them stronger. So let's say that we're going to use evidence card C. We're talking about the flowing water model. So if somebody, and this is a claim that somebody really did right. This was their total scientific argument. They said, I believe the channel is water because of the model. First of all, you have to make sure that you really pay attention to what you're writing. The channel is not water. Like really restate the question and then answer it. And then this person did use evidence, but they didn't explain it. So if we rewrote it so that it was answering the answer or answering the question better, it would say, I believe that the channel was formed by water. And specifically, you should say flowing water. Evidence card C shows a model of landforms made by flowing water. So up here where they said because of the model, don't assume that the reader knows what you're talking about. So you kind of have to explain what the model shows. Tell me what evidence card C shows, and make sure that you are actually citing that evidence card. You can't just say because of the model. It's too general. It's too ambiguous. So you have to be specific and say evidence card C shows a model of landforms made by flowing water. And then we want to go ahead and add some kind of an explanation, which was scientists use models to get evidence about processes in the natural world that are difficult to observe. Okay, so we're using key concept number 3 to explain how a model can explain what happened on Mars. I don't know what just happened there. And then we're going to restate the answer, and we're going to say, therefore, flowing water formed the channel on Mars. Oh, you guys, you know what? I'm sorry. Scientists use models to get evidence about processes in the natural world that are difficult to observe. This second sentence that I'm using is adding some of that background information that you guys saw on those big cards. So we know that since flowing water forms channels on Earth, we can assume that the same thing happens on Mars because, and this is key concept number 2, they're both rocky planets. So I took those key concepts, I kind of reworded them in my own words, and I made them make sense. You do not have to copy your key concepts word for word, okay? So I used key concepts 3 and 2. I also used some of that background information, and then I added the answer to the question again. All right. So remember to answer the question, and the question is, what geologic process formed the channel on Mars? You need to first of all use your strongest piece of evidence. So this is evidence card F. It's the most convincing, so we want to start with that. You need to restate and answer the question by identifying which evidence you choose. You have to tell me evidence card F, and then use reasoning to explain why the evidence card F supports your claim. This is going to be key concepts. This is going to be background information. And then lastly, restate your answer. Okay? This is what you're going to be required to write for your scientific argument on Monday. And so this is what I want you to practice. You will write 2 paragraphs because you are going to use 2 pieces of evidence. Start with your strongest piece of evidence first, okay? So restate the question, answer the question, cite using your number 1 piece of evidence. You need to explain how the evidence supports the claim of flowing water. And then in this paragraph, you also need to explain how evidence number 1 refutes flowing lava. Okay, when you're done with that paragraph, then you'll write a second paragraph, and you're going to have to include a transition to this paragraph. So maybe your opening sentence would be another reason that blah, blah, blah. I don't want to give you the answers or tell you what to write because I want you to come up with it on your own. But write some kind of a transition into this next paragraph. Then you're going to cite evidence number 2. And so refer back to your graphic organizer where you evaluated your evidence. What's the second piece of evidence that supports flowing water, and only use that. Remember, we are not including any evidence that supports flowing lava because that's not the answer. That's not the claim that we're making. Once you use evidence number 2, you're going to explain how evidence number 2 supports that claim. Remember, use key concepts, use background information to explain. And then the last sentence of this paragraph is your concluding sentence. You need to make sure that you restate the answer again. Okay? You may want to keep this slide open so that you can refer back to it as you're writing. And let me know if you have any questions. All right. Take care. See you later.